Thank you so much. On behalf of the Planning Committee of Prof Ngugi's Lifetime Achievement Award, I'm very, very pleased as the Planning Committee Chair and the founding President of Kenya Diaspora Alliance to present this Lifetime Achievement Award. It bears the logos of all the organizing organizations that include One Voice Consortium, KESA, which is Kenya Study Scholar Association, Association of Kenya Diaspora Organizations, and of course, Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We are very happy to present this to Pheroze Nowrojee, to present it to Mwalimu.
Ngugi, on behalf of all who are present here and of all those who could not be able to be present this afternoon here, and to all who are everywhere around the world, millions of your admirers, we humbly present you with this award.
Asante sana Rais Marasa for helping us with that, and Pheroze for handing over to our Mwalimu the Medal of Honor and our Nobel, the People's Nobel Peace Prize for Literature. Yeah. The People's. At this point, if you may allow me, we're going to have to be very brief, Pheroze, I'm sorry for that. But you have the floor as our keynote speaker, and then we will hand over to Mwalimu to crown your office.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are a few of us in this hall today who were there and were aware, and we speak as witnesses, when Ngugi broke through in 1964-65 and in the following years. It is important to see and to know what he was doing. We have witness after witness this afternoon who have reminded you of what he did. But we have to look further. We are looking at an impact, and we have to see what that constitutes in seeing as a model and seeing as something that explains how we can move forward to social justice. And so what was happening those years in Kenya was what the Italian philosophers very succinctly put a century ago. The basis of the power that a ruling government, like the colonialist governments, exerts over its subject peoples is not only economic or military power. It is also, and I quote, because it persuades the ruled to accept the system of beliefs of the ruling power, and thereby it begins to take over the ruled persons to share in the new social, cultural, and moral values of the ruling occupiers. Obviously, always to their benefit. So that is what was facing Kenya in 1963 up to the change. And when independence came, as we are aware, the legal change did not bring about this change of the domination of the culture, social and moral beliefs of the colony. So, the issue is that what Ngugi was doing was to break the hold of this historical fact, which was in a century and 2 centuries of colonialism impacting upon the whole world. And so what he had to do was to bring about, in the words, again I quote, a new political will in the country. And in this, we see that that new political will and the way that he was breaking it constitutes a model of freedom. That it is what Professor Moko thought a bizarre irony that the events in where he was in Florida were no longer something we should look up to when they were contradicting their old models. But what Ngugi has done is to show that there are new models of freedom which are in the global south. And in Colombia, in Kenya, when Rosen spoke about the good things in Kenya, they are good. And they constitute not only a model for Kenyans, they constitute a model for Africa or for people who are oppressed in Australia or in South America or anywhere in the world. And so now the way we should look is in ourselves. And so that is what Ngugi was doing. It is a major, major shift in the decolonization, not Kenya alone, but of the whole world. And we can see that what is happening is that we pass through these cycles and the reaction of the former dominating cultures. We can see that what is happening in Gaza now is the internationalization of the rejection of what is the occupying power there is doing. When you shift that political will, you are bringing about a change away from that, and by that change comes from breaking it down. But Ngugi was not only breaking down things, Ngugi was building. And what do you build? And what did he build? He built the alternative to this hold upon the minds of the globe. This is the key thing that he was doing. And for us in Kenya at that time, we saw different aspects of that colonial thing breaking not only the literature department, from the English literature to the Department of Literature, but when Ngugi wrote Detained, we as lawyers who come up against legal injustice in our face, what was happening in that book was an exposure of the pretense of legal justice being part of the government of Jomo Kenyatta. And it broke the mental hold that legitimacy had upon the people. Colonial obedience and the Kenyatta regime holding on not just to the colonial ideas, but holding on to the mechanics of injustice and using them, detention, imprisonment, torture, etc. So the alternative that Ngugi was holding out was self-respect, respect for each other, looking for the models within ourselves. And that is important to realize, because we have heard today many times and in other discussions that Kamertu represents the shift, that we are looking at workers and peasants. There's something much more in the new political will. It was Ngugi was bringing about, and others, as Professor had said earlier, collectively, that it was a new national political will that was being changed. And that is why the impact is not just workers and peasants. It is how do we explain the extraordinary impact on the intellectuals of the country, on the intellectuals of the diaspora, on the intellectuals of the world, of Africa. Because what we are seeing is a model that can go forward from a concern that only a vanguard party of workers and peasants can move leadership. It is, we have to see that the model is more of that, and that is what the Italian philosopher was saying. So Kenya, and a close look at its history, what we heard just now from Dr. the change of the community within the United States. So each of these things are impacting on different ways, and the model is going forward. So that is an important thing. So among his greatest achievements, and he has so many achievements that the screen could not be filled, Ngugi. We had to run that thing several times. So it is that. So it is in that aspect that what we see is a breaking away from that past, and not only putting forward the alternative, but that the people, all people in Kenya, loved the alternative and loved the person who was leading that charge at that time there, Ngugi, and they loved him for it. They loved him for his readiness to share that alternative. They loved him for his willingness to suffer just as they did suffer from the police, from the chiefs, from little prison cells, and for detention in a larger prison. And they loved him for that because he was sharing their suffering. And Ngugi's love for Kenya was evidenced by all this. And that is what we saw. And that is why the first part of what I'm saying is entitled in my notes as Ngugi and the People. And I turn now to Ngugi and the state, because the people loved him, but did the state love him? So let us see what the state did to him. Firstly, there was the banning of the Kamiritu performances. Now this was an impact, unexpected. It was a pleasant surprise that that voice could be shared, that it was not only a secret voice during the emergency, it was a voice expressing a people's hope for centuries. And not only the people around the mountain, every person in Kenya. And so they banned it. And it's a small irony. Special Branch was aware that Special Branch was aware that sedition could be done by journalists, and that the printed word was expressed seditiously by journalists. It had never occurred to them that sedition could be expressed and subversive ideas could come through the creative work of artists, writers, etc. And so when Community blew up in their faces, it took a while before they realized that, goodness, we've overlooked an area of oppression and suppression. And so they promptly banned it. It hadn't occurred to them. And so from that time onwards, Ngugi, you are responsible for the attention of oppressors to creative writing. Then they put him into detention, we know that. Then they put him into exile. Then, and this is a very, even worse, there began a period of erasure, erasing Ngugi from the presence, his presence in Kenya, in the classroom, in the university, in the public debates, such as were surviving by then, and from the minds of people. And so the next was the physical harm that they did to Ngugi. And so you see a deep end, they cannot contain him, because by then Ngugi is not an individual. Ngugi was a historical force for which they had no answers at all. And so they thought, if you put him in detention, he'll keep quiet. If you ban his place, he'll keep quiet. If you put him in exile, he'll keep quiet. We'll beat him up, we'll do bad things to him. So that would take that part, all these attacks were by the government, by the state. So we do not say that Kenyans caused these things. We know that the state did that. And it reached the height of these attacks against Ngugi, continued, and this is the poem that I wrote. Everybody's reading poems today. This is terrible. And this is the poem that I wrote in 2006, 2007, at the time of the worst attacks. And the contrast is Ngugi's love for Kenya and the state not requiting that love. And so the poem is called Unrequited. It is a sonnet for Ngugi and family. There are sorrows more hurtful than dying, unruly injuries that shake off bridles, recidivist skin that keeps breaking, wounds that search for unhealing sores. Because the mind, unasked, unwelcomed, can keep creating pain. Short amnesties cannot hold. Before flares return, reigniting diminishing recollection. Despite these cruel summons of memory, we keep loving, unasked, unwelcomed, over years, which pass without touching, sometimes people, sometimes earth. Even though history tells us, and in law it is cited, there are loves that will not be requited. Ngugi, nevertheless, kept on. Ngugi's intense love for Kenya has never faltered, and his love for Kenya has not been requited by the government, and our gathering today, here, together now, is to honor people, but also to show to these governments from 1960s onwards till now. And this gathering is not reflected in Kenya. Why not? So this is a gathering and our occasion to show that the people make that distinction between state and themselves. And if you agree, Madam Chair, I would request you to request all of us to be upstanding and to show and to put the record straight for the state of Kenya to give an ovation to Ngugi now here. So then let this record go back there for persons who are tone deaf to love and who are tone deaf to law and who are tone deaf to kindness, what others think of them. So then what is the future of the direction in which Ngugi has brought the country and all over the globe, and what are the diasporic duties? And so after honoring Ngugi here, do we go home and keep silent on the constant constitutional dangers that are present? Obviously, the question answers itself. So, the biggest danger that is present there just now is the destruction of the Constitution. And because they cannot destroy it so easily, to destroy it is to destroy their own legitimacy. They destroy the heart of the Constitution by making amendments or by disregarding it or by other steps. And what is the biggest step that they take to do this? And it is this, that who are the persons to whom we go to when there is a breach of our own rights and fundamental freedoms? We go to court. And who decides that? It is judges and magistrates. And therefore it is in the hands of the judges and magistrates to uphold our rights in the country. But if the executive does not want those rights upheld, then they have to remove or subordinate or buy or induce or threaten those judges and magistracies into compliance. And so that is the way, that is the single most effective way of a corrupt and oppressive regime to take away a people's freedom. And so therefore, this danger is the one we should now be moving against. That we need to see that the Constitution is upheld, and the best way is to uphold the judges and magistrates. And so that is the task, that is the biggest task that now all Kenyans have to direct themselves to. No less the diasporan Kenyans who are all over the world, but particularly here and in the UK, Middle East, and some parts of Europe. And that is the task that we have to focus. So we have to keep defending the Constitution, and we have to keep defending the judiciary. Because the concept of government that this regime has is this. The model is Moi, and those 24 years, their model is an absolute presidency, unquestioning obedience, and the provincial administration. That is their concept. And it is this that is the danger. Now, is this danger remote? Is this danger something that is not really imminent? It is not only imminent, I will submit to you, it is present. This danger is present. I give you 3 pieces of evidence. First, that the shooting of these unarmed young persons continues, although the lesson of last year, that not for me, but for them. The second piece, second evidence that I put before you is that what is happening now is this. We are receiving reports here in the US of how police are going in, not in uniforms, to houses and pinpointing that you were at the demonstration. You telephoned so-and-so. You did this. This is twofold. One, it is the use of technology in order to aid the government to create government by fear. They come with no uniform. They are not arresting people. They're simply taking them away. They don't necessarily charge them. They then release them. And that is the criteria of fear. A threat is not a threat if it's being executed. A threat is more effective and continuing if it's kept hanging over people. We do not want a government by fear. The last time, in such a time, and now we are seeing these shootings, the last time when there was a government by fear, torture chambers, special branch, we lost one of the greatest Kenyan heroes, Karimi Ndutu. His example continues to inspire us by its integrity, his courage, and the constancy of his ideals. No giving up. Why? No giving up. Because he believed he was doing right. And it was a selfless belief. He was not there to make money. He was not there to accept what they were offering him, because that's the first step. You're offered something. And best of all, he was not offered because they knew he would never accept. That is the integrity that moved him, and that courage, which, bringing the consistency of his ideals into persistence in action. Because what is important is that change is actually brought about. And it is that selflessness in the people's cause that we honor. And I would ask for your applause for this great hero who remains a model for all people who are serious about changing things. My third evidence, and it is this. Is the threat of the return of the Moi years a remote threat or a fanciful threat? This is the Assembly and Demonstration Bill 2024. It was published in April and it's received by the National Assembly last week, 13th June 2024. And what does it say? It says openly that they want, it is a private member's bill with a lot of very expert drafting by the legislative draftsmen of the Attorney General's Department. So what does it say? It says the principal object of this bill is to provide a legal framework for the regulation of assemblies and demonstrations. Now, you can't regulate what is given in the Constitution. That is amending the Constitution. But nevertheless, they go on, and what do they want? They want to amend it by saying that anybody who wants to hold a gathering must apply to the regulating officer. And who is the regulating officer? It is the officer in charge of the police station. We are going right back there to 1978 to 2002. It is so brazen that one even wonders whether there is any sense of reality, but no, do not underestimate the determination. So, do not underestimate them. These are real things. Your task as the diasporan societies is to draw. So may I finally, literally one more minute. I feel that we are all feeling that we should express these things, and so I say, does this, what I'm about to read this paragraph, express the feeling of this afternoon? This gathering, honoring Mwalimu Ngugi wa Thiong'o, mourns the death of two unarmed young persons. They are not anonymous. This business of 67 people died, and the next day we go on, and the government says, we have told the police not to do it. No, they are not anonymous. This gathering honoring Mwalimu Ngugi wa Thiong'o mourns the death of two unarmed young persons and calls upon all Kenyans to obey the Constitution of Kenya in all they do. May we then follow up that and pay tribute to Ngugi here today and to the legacy, so that his legacy continues.